Everybody, Mo here, and in this deck guide for dummies, I'm bringing you deep sea monsters. Some people call them sea monsters, some people call them deep monsters or deep sea monsters. We're just gonna call them sea monsters. Anyways, I absolutely love this deck. This is my favorite deck from the new set. I've been grinding this deck since day 1, and I've said since day 2 that this deck is going to be S tier by the end of next week. Just give people a week or two to optimize this list, and it'll be one of the best, if not the best deck available to people. And so, to start off, I'm going to apologize for my hiccups. I don't know what's wrong with me, but a lot of things, and one of them is hiccups. So, let's get into sea monsters. What is the deep sea monster deck, and how does it work? So, sea monsters, or Deep Sea Monsters, is a really cool and fun deck that allows you to beat your opponent in the face by playing these just massive, gigantic creatures. This deck is brand new and uses a lot of cards from the new Bilgewater region. So while it's not the cheapest deck to build, it's definitely worth the craft, and I recommend it. I usually don't like recommending decks for people, especially when new sets drop out or new cards come out, because I don't want to be responsible if I think a deck's going to be good and then someone goes out and drops, their $20 budget on it or however much money, and it ends up being complete garbage. But I can fully say with full confidence that this deck is 100% worth your shards, your wild cards, everything. This deck is really, really good. So the deck focuses on getting deep as fast as possible while staying alive in the early game. And that may sound difficult, but this is actually really easily done because you play Shadow Isles and you get the trifecta of removal spells and Vile Feast, Grasp of the Undying, and Wither Whale. Again, sorry for my hiccups. Fuck hiccups. After you live for about 5 to 6 turns, you usually hit deep around turn 6 to 7, and all hell breaks loose. You slam down a Nautilus on turn 7, he makes all your sea monsters cost 4 less, and then your next turn is just you playing 3 to 5 ginormous creatures. And it's just a fun time for you, and a sad and frustrating time for your opponents. In my opinion, again, Sea Monsters is easily the second best deck in the game right now. If not the best deck, it's about 50-50 with Demacia. So, the reason I think this deck is just so good is because you do have a favored matchup against aggro, because you play all the life gain and removal spells, and you have a really good game against control, because you either win with Maokai, and you can mill them out on turn 6 or 7, or you slam down, 5 humongous creatures that's hard for them to deal with on turn 8, and they just can't do anything. And again, your banner matchup's about 50-50. It just depends on how they draw, and we'll go over the strengths and weaknesses of the deck right after that. So that's about as good as it gets in the current meta. Being able to beat aggro and control and have a 50-50 bannerman matchup is absolutely insane. So for the next part of the video, I'm going to go over what each card in the deck's purpose is and how you should plan on using each card. Alright, so here's my deck list that I used to get to Diamond. I used this deck. I started Plat 4. I didn't play Ranked for the first couple days because it was completely hectic and I just wanted to try out new things and have fun. So it did take me about 2 days of actually playing and grinding Rank with this deck to get from Plat 4 0 OP all the way up to Diamond. And I will have the deck code below for those of you wanting this exact deck code, and I'm just going to go over the purpose of each card and why I chose to play some cards instead of others. So, Dredgers, very easy, 1 mana 2/1, toss 3. It's a blocker on turn 1 against aggro decks, and it tosses 3, and it's just good at helping you get deep early. Jettison, 1 mana toss 4, helps you get deep early. Thorny Toad, 2 mana 1/4 that tosses 2, and then gains you 2 life. This card's not very great. The reason I play this is because I look at this as a 4th Vile Feast, and right now, Ranked is flooded with burn aggro. So if you don't have a Vile Feast on turn 2, you can have a Thorny Toad, and this still blocks a 2/1, or it blocks their Grenadier. And usually you can block Grenadier, and you can gain the health back that the Grenadier deals damage to you. So that's always nice. You have Vile Feast because good card. You have Deadbloom Wanderer because insane card. It's a 3/2 body that tosses 3, and it has lifesteal for absolutely 0 reason. So, very insane card. Jaw Hunters, this card is really, really good in the Demacia matchup and in your Elusive matchup. Ideally, what happens is you're attacking on turn 3. What I usually do is I will pass on my turn 3 and allow my opponent to play their Misfortune, to play their Fiora, to play their Badger Bear. And you have a 3-mana 4/1 that easily trades into their 3-mana 4/4 or into their 3-mana champion. Because 9 times out of 10, they're not just going to pass on their turn 3. Or if they do, you're probably ahead on board anyways. Because they just pass on their turn 3, which means they don't have a 3-mana 4/4. They don't have a Misfortune. They don't have a Fiora, which is pretty good for you. And then you play Maokai because he's a really, really good win condition, and you can actually trigger him pretty often on turn 6 or 7. When I first saw Maokai, I personally thought he was a dog shit, bad, ugly, bad champion, and he is ugly. But he's actually not that bad. I've played this deck from all the way from 3 Maokais, like the current list, all the way down to 0 Maokais and playing only Nautilus, and now I'm back to just 3 Maokai because it's a super consistent way to beat control decks and to beat the slower decks, and he can give you challenger units every turn that you need to beat elusive decks, and can really help your trades and your board presence easier against Demacia decks. We play 2 salvage. 3 salvage seems like a little much to me. It helps you toss, and burst speed draws you 2 cards, so it really helps you to get deep. But again, 3 salvage seemed a little bit much. I played 2 Beast Blows. A lot of people don't play Beast Blows because I think this is a really useless card. But I beg to differ. It helps the Demacia matchup a fucking ton. I can't tell you how many times my opponent played something on turn 3 or played a unit on turn 4, it gives me priority, and now I have a 4-mana 4/4. Blocks Fiora, blocks any unit they've played on turns 1 through 3, and the stats on this thing, it has 4 health, so it doesn't die to any good removal spell at the moment. It doesn't die to Get Excited, Gotchas, Grasps. If they want to remove it, they usually have to 2-for-1 themselves. So it always feels good. And of course, when you play Nautilus on turn 7, he's completely free, so it can give you an even more powerful turn 7. And you don't have to wait until turn 8 to pop off with him. But I only play 2 because while all those things are good, he's also not the greatest, and I had to cut 1 to make room for the atrocities we'll talk about in a minute. Abyssal Eye. Card's absolutely nutty. I've actually considered playing this card in my elusive deck. Yeah, it just draws you a card. It helps you get deep. It's elusive and a 5-mana 6/6 elusive that draws you a card when it hits your Nexus. Pretty good. Grasp of the Undying because good card, and Withering Wail because good card, and Atrocity. So I played 2 Atrocities in my list, and that's because it's really the Mirror Breaker. So in the Mirror match, if you're not playing Atrocities, there's almost 0 skill. It's literally just both of you are goldfishing to try and get deep as fast as possible, and then either win with Maokai win condition, or just slam as many sea monsters down as fast as possible. So Atrocity really puts you over the top in the Mirror match. I play 2 Atrocities, so in the Dream scenario, you draw both Atrocities, and you can actually kill your opponent while they're at 20, because you just Atrocity your Nautilus, and that's for 13, and you Atrocity any other sea monster, and that's usually over 20. So that's really nice. It also helps you in the control matchups. If it's, Karina control, and on turn 9 they're playing a Ledros or a Karina, you can just throw one of your big units at them. If your Carmezriel opponent taps out, throw a big unit at them. If you're playing against Demacia and you just stabilize with all your units, you can just throw one of your, and all you need is 1 sea monster to hit. Typically, if you can just get 1 7-power sea monster to hit, you always have lethal with Atrocity on Nautilus. So that's always good. It's always just random 13 damage to the face. And on ladder, people won't expect it, or it could catch people off guard if they think, oh, I can go down to 10, or I can let one of these sea monsters hit me. It's okay, I'm at 20 health, I'll go down to 10 health or something. You just Atrocity them out of nowhere. Devourer of the Depths. So this card looks really, really good, but in play, it's actually not that great. It's kind of just okay. Don't forget, because the reason is they can deal damage to this Devourer of Depths while it's on the stack, and it negates the ability. So even when you're deep and the Devourer of Depths is a 7/7, if you try to eat something that has 5 toughness, all your opponent has to do is like Mystic Shot it, or Grasp of the Undying it, or fight it with a smaller unit using single combat. Like, literally just do any amount of damage to it, and now it doesn't kill the Garen, or now it doesn't kill the Cytheria. So because of those reasons, it's not very good. But on the other hand, sometimes it's really, really good. Like, if you play it on turn 6 against somebody's, I don't remember the name, but the 4/1 scout that dies and makes a 4/4, because it obliterates, they don't get the 4/4. They don't get the death triggers. If you obliterate a champion, it won't come back with not with Atrocity. It won't come back with Rekindler. And Obliterate is one of the only ways this deck can deal with the Unyielding card. If they Unyielding a Fiora, you can Devour Depths it. Now, most of the time, they're going to have either Deny or Single Combat to negate the effect, but, you tried. Of course, Nautilus, big boy. Reason you play the deck. Very good card, very good. Good big boy. Makes all your units cost less. And he is also one of the ways you deal with Unyielding Spirits, is when you have a Nautilus in play and a Nautilus in your hand, you get a Nautilus's Riptide, and it's basically just 4 mana, shuffle an enemy into your opponent's deck, and it gets rid of threats on the board. You'll have to deal with them later eventually, but at least they won't have Unyielding strapped onto them, and they can die. And then Shipwreck Quarters. So I play 2 Shipwreck Quarters because I think 3 is too many, and 2 feels really good. You definitely want more than 1 because some matchups you just really want the treasures, and most of the time, more than 2 just felt kind of unnecessary. And the last card that I'm going to talk about that's actually not in my deck list is the Boat, the 8 mana Terror of the Tides. So it's 8 mana, 6/5, attack, give all enemies -2 this round, and then sea monsters you have Fearsome. So this is basically just, I'm going to play this unit, attack, and then none of your opponents can block, and you just win the game. The reason I don't play any of this card is because I think it's kind of unnecessary. Most of the time, if your board is full of 10 6s or 7 7s or 6/6 elusive creatures, they're going to have a really tough time blocking and living anyways, and you don't really need this, because once you attack once, they pretty much have to trade their entire board away to not die, or they have a threat of dying to Atrocity. So it's kind of unneeded, and it's just get really clunky in your hand if you ever draw it when you don't have Nautilus on the field, because playing this on turn 8 never really feels good if you have to spend all 8 mana on it. And it's just one of those things where it's like, if you get it off of Jaw Hunters, that's nice. If you don't get it off of Jaw Hunters and you're not playing it, you probably don't need it. I just found this to be way more clunky and useless in my hand, and clog up my hand more times than I've actually had it be useful in my games. So that's covering over all of the cards and the deck list and all of their purpose. So now I'm going to go over the deck's strengths and weaknesses. So the strengths of this deck. First one is that deck is great at 1-for-1ing. This means that you can keep up with your opponent in pace if they just play 1 card a turn. So if they play a 1 mana 3/2, you can counter it with a 1 mana 2/1. If they play a unit on turn 3, you can block it on turn 3, or you have Grasp, and every turn after that, you can play a unit or a spell to deal with their 1 unit. Next strength is you have multiple win cons, depending on the matchup. So, depending on how the matchup is going or what the matchup is, you can flex between your Maokai win condition or your Sea Monsters win condition. If you're playing against, really slow, grindy control decks, you can try and just hyper toss your deck away and then just slam a Maokai on turn 6, and then you can have Maokai ult on usually turn 6 to turn 7. Or, if it's a creature matchup and you just have a whole bunch of Sea Monsters and Nautilus in your hand, you can toss pretty well, and then you can get deep on turn 5 or 6, play a really big Sea Monster on 6, then play a 13/13 Nautilus on turn 7, and then just overwhelm your opponent with Sea Monsters on turn 8. And that usually works before, the Karma Ezreal deck needs to turn 10 before it can win. So if you're playing a bunch of Sea Monsters on turn 7 and 8, that doesn't give them time to get their Karma leveled up, and then you can win that way. The next strength is, this deck is extremely consistent. Everything in your deck does what it's supposed to. It's designed to do one thing, and that's get rid of cards in your deck, either by tossing them, by drawing, or by keeping you alive. And your deck just does the same thing over and over and over again. Turn 1, 2-1, toss 3. Turn 3, you're finding a way to toss 3 more. Turn 5, you're playing an elusive unit that's drawing cards out of your deck. It's just very consistent and does the exact same thing over and over and over again, which is exactly what you want whenever you're looking for a deck to play on Ranked Ladder. This deck has really good matchups versus Burn Control, and a 50-50 matchup versus Bannerman. This is something I covered when I was going over what the deck does. And that right now is actually extremely, extremely good. I don't think any other deck can say that they have as many good matchups as this deck does. Again, the only not favored matchup is really just elusives, but nobody's really playing elusives at the moment. So as long as you can dodge the random elusive player, most of the ladder right now is just going to be good matchups for you, or 50-50 matchups for you, that if you play really well, you can probably even turn those into 60-40 matchups. And the last strength is, once you flip the switch, you're gone. Once you get deep, or once you slam that Nautilus on turn 7 and you're deep, you're gone. Opponent's not catching up to you. You're playing 0 mana 7/7s, you're playing 1 mana 6/6 elusive units, you're playing 2 mana 7/7 exile your opponent's units, you're playing a leveled up Maokai on turn 6, and your opponent's going to be dead on turn 10 from decking out. It's just, the deck turns a corner really, really fast at an instant. And a lot of times, your opponent just can't react to it and can't keep up once your deck actually gets going and is finally done getting there. So now, those are the strengths. We're going to go over the weaknesses, and there's really only 3 weaknesses with the deck. So, the weakness number 1, which is the biggest one, is you don't ever nut draw. There's not really a nut draw in this deck that you can reliantly, wait on. So with Bannerman, you can say, okay, my nut draw is going to be like turn 1, 1 mana unit, turn 2, triple 1 mana unit or something like that. Same with Burn. You can say, my opener is going to be triple 1 mana unit into double Boom Kuruki or triple Boom Kuruki. And you know that if you get this nut draw, you cannot lose against basically any deck. And Sea Monsters don't have that. The only real nut draw you have is you can use Maokai Ultimate on turn 5 or 6. I believe I've had it on turn 5 before. But even with that, that's not enough to win you a Burn matchup. That might not even be enough to win you a Bannerman matchup, depending on, how they've played their turns out. Because if you're tossing that hard, that means you probably have some number of jettisons, which means you don't have that many units, or the units you have played are just tiny little 2/1s, which can't really block very well, and your board is just going to be a Maokai. So even if you Maokai ult them on turn, let's say 5, they're not actually decking out until the end of turn 9, start of turn 10, which means they have another 4 turns to just kill you with units. So your nut draw, quote-unquote nut draw, is not really that good. However, I mean, it's really, really good against control decks, but if you're not playing a really slow deck, it's not even an insta-win, so that's not good. The second weakness is it's really hard to play from behind with this deck. So as I was mentioning, not only do you not have a nut draw, but if your opponent opens with a nut draw, or you get behind, it's really hard. If your opponent drops 2 units on turn 2 and a unit on turn 1, you can't really keep up with that, because you're just playing 1 unit at a time. Granted, your units are pretty big and can usually 1-for-1 your opponent, like we mentioned in the strengths, but your 4 mana 4/4 can deal with his 4 mana unit, but it can't deal if he plays 2 units, or if your opponent plays a unit and then a save spell. It's just really hard for you to get from behind until about turn 7. Once you hit turn 7, it gets a little easier, because all of a sudden you're playing 3 units a turn as well, and they're a lot larger. However, the problem is to get to turn 7 at an okay life total. And the last weakness here that I kind of just mentioned is you can't deal with opponent's nut draw. So that kind of goes with it's hard to play from behind, but I know they're called nut draws because most decks can't deal with them. Like I said, if your opponent opens with a 1 mana 3/2 and then triple Boom Kuruki, there's very few decks that can deal with that at all. But the biggest thing I've noticed while playing Sea Monsters is that I find myself losing to these crazy draws from my opponent more often, and just it not even being close. Like, I don't even have a chance. So that's going to be it for strengths and weaknesses. Now the moment that everyone comes forward in these guys is the Mulligan guide. So I'm going to give a quick Mulligan guide here about what cards I like to go over and what cards I like to see in my opening hand versus all of the tier 1 decks at the moment. And if you want a more in-depth matchup guide, you can go over to my Discord and get it for free. All you have to do is just click on my Discord link in the description and then look for the deck guide channel. Alright, so just going down the line of tier 1 decks, we have Bannerman / Bannerman Scouts. So in this matchup, I wanted to see Dredgers, Dead Bloom Wonder, Jaw Hunters, and Grasp in my hand. Against Burnt Aggro, I want to see Dredge Dredgers, Vile Feast, Dead Blue Wanderer, Grasp, and Withering Will in my hand. Basically just all of the life gain cards. Against Karina Control, you want Withering Will to deal with the Brood Awakenings, and then literally anything that tosses, and then a Maokai, that's usually your win condition. Against Ezreal Karma, and then your Heinrich control decks, and just typically all control decks, you just literally want anything that tosses, and then a Maokai to slam down on turn 6, win the game. So against Kinko Elusives, you just want, a Bible and pray. This is your hardest matchup by far because you can't block any of their units, and it's really hard to one-for-one them when they play so many save spells between the Elixir of Iron, the Twin Disciplines, the Denies, stuff like that. It's just really hard to deal with it. But ideally, you want Vile Feast, Grasp, Jaw Hunters to try and pull them, and then you want Maokai. You want Maokai because Maokai produces a Challenger unit, and you want that to pull their elusives out from underneath because Challenger just counters elusives. And then elusive OTK, you really never win this matchup. This is one of those you definitely want to buy a Bible and pray matchups, but you just want Jaw Hunters, Grasp, and Maokai for the same reasons as elusive. Jaw Hunters is a Challenger, which counters elusive. Grasp to try and threaten them, to force them to have standalone. And then Maokai because Challenger beats elusives. And really, even if they don't have elusive, if they just have like a Zed that's super buffed, the Challenger unit forces them to have a save spell every single turn. Otherwise, eventually you can wear down that unit and kill it. In the mirror match, you kind of just want Atrocity, and then anything that tosses in a Maokai. That way you can try and win with a Maokai win condition. But more than anything, you really just want Atrocity, because even if you go late game, you can just Atrocity your Nautilus in a stale board state for 13. If you've done any chip damage to them at all with the elusive unit maybe. Or in the dream scenario, you draw both of your Atrocities, and of course you just double Atrocity as face. And then in the Endure Spiders list, you just want Vile Feast and Withering Wail. That's literally, you just need 2 cards. 2 cards and you win the game. This way you can kill spiders. And that's going to be it for this video, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Let me know if you guys have any questions about the deck. I got Diamond with this deck. I really enjoyed it. I plan on taking this deck to Masters. I played this deck in tournament and did really well. I got 17th out of like 160 people tournament. Beat PBG. It's just a very, very solid and very, very good deck. I hope you guys have as much success with this deck as I have had and hope to continue to have. So that's gonna be it for this video. Make sure you guys follow me on Twitch. I stream on there almost every single day. Make sure you guys subscribe here so you don't miss another video, and then join my Discord so you get notifications on everything. And I'll see you guys in the next video.